Hi, I'm Steve Ehrmann, Vice President of the Teaching, Learning, and Technology Group. This short video is designed for use in faculty workshops about teaching in high-tech classrooms. The video itself is about 7 minutes long or so. The workshop can be as little as short as 15 minutes or so. The TLT Group is a not-for-profit. We've been able to do our work for the last 10 years only because of the financial support of several hundred subscribing institutions. So if your institution is an active subscriber, we hope you'll use these materials for workshops. If you're a faculty member and an active subscriber and like what you see here, please let your colleagues know about it. If your institution isn't yet a subscriber, we'd appreciate it if your institution did subscribe before using these materials. And if you'd like to know right now if your institution is an active subscriber, just pause the video. Go to www.tltgroup.org and search on that home page using the terms current subscribers. In a sense, this workshop revolves around this one question: what does educational research tell us about how to use high-tech classrooms in order to improve student learning? One of the things that research tells us is that it's possible, to some degree, to break that into two questions. First, what do research and experience tell us about the kinds of teaching and learning activities, that is to say, what students do, what faculty do, the kinds of teaching and learning activities that are most likely to lead to terrific results? We'll call those learning outcomes, whatever you mean by a terrific result, whether it's students becoming wiser, more capable, reducing attrition. There are, in fact, a number of educational outcomes quite different from each other, all of which are boosted by the same teaching and learning activities. And then the second question: after you've identified those activities, what do research and experience tell us about how to take advantage of technology? And by that I mean tools and facilities, both old and new, in order to make such teaching and learning activities easier, richer, and more successful. Let's take question number one. Over 20 years ago, Art Chickering and Zelda Gamson wrote a very short, very influential article summarizing decades of research on learning and undergraduate education. There are summaries you can read that are longer. None, I think, that are this good, that are this short. The question they were answering: what kinds of improvements in teaching tend to improve learning outcomes, the results of learning? Their summary was called The 7 Principles of Good Practice in Undergraduate Education. Those 7 principles are listed on this slide. The original article, plus hundreds of ideas for putting these principles into action, are on the last slide in this presentation. We'll get to that in a couple of minutes. A couple of years after Chickering and Gamson, I was working on an inquiry of my own, quite informal. We know that the impact of technology on learning is indirect. That's what that two-part slide was. The importance of technology lies in whether and how it influences what students actually do as they learn, and what faculty do as they teach. So my research question was: what are faculty and students doing with computers that actually seems to them to be helping learning? I just asked faculty, and this slide summarizes what faculty at dozens of institutions said to me over a period of several years. Coincidentally, it's also a list of 7 items, and I think it is a coincidence. I wasn't really that conscious of Chickering and Gamson's earlier work, and you may notice that it's somewhat similar to, not identical, but quite similar to Chickering and Gamson's list. In 1992, I started work on the Flashlight program. That's an evaluation strategy. We wanted to help institutions detect whether their investments in computing were paying off in better learning outcomes. In late 1992, we realized that the 7 principles suggested a wonderful way to frame our inquiry, because the ways that faculty happened to be using technology, and the ways they thought were working, their experience in other words, matched up very well with the activities that only 6 years earlier Chickering and Gamson had argued that, according to research, were great ways to improve learning outcomes. So many of the questions in our Flashlight surveys ask about whether students are using technology for these 7 particular purposes. That got me quite interested in the 7 principles. I've been interested ever since. Here again they are. You can read this slide, but I'd like to say just a little bit more about the 3rd principle and the 7th one. Active learning. Chickering and Gamson were pointing to modes of learning that require students to make choices in order to learn. In other words, if they aren't making active choices, if they aren't doing this and that, the whole activity stops. You ask a student to write an essay. If the student doesn't write, nothing happens. If you give them the opportunity to do an experiment, they don't decide what experiment to do and how to do it, nothing happens. That's the sense that they meant when they said active learning. For principle number 7, there were 2 connotations, and I think they meant both. First of all, of course, students are different from each other, and so they almost always need to learn somewhat different things, and they learn best in somewhat different ways. Now, that diversity can seem sometimes like a distraction and a burden to faculty members. How do I teach in one classroom students who want to learn different things or who learn differently from one another? And the principal says find ways, and we've got a collection of ways of doing that in that collection of teaching ideas that we'll get to in a minute. But it also means something else. Sometimes that very diversity can help all those students learn, even better than if the students were identical with each other. For example, suppose students have different interpretations of a key point that you're trying to teach. Well, you could use that to trigger a debate, and in the process take a little step forward to helping students how to use evidence to make up their own minds, one of the most important goals of all of higher education. So now it's time for a little active learning for you, and perhaps some collaborative learning. The question is how to use the room where you're going to be teaching, perhaps it's even the room where you're sitting right now. How can you use the classroom where you're going to teach in order to boost one or more of those 7 principles, in order to improve the outcomes of your course, in order to help students learn better, and to increase the chance that they'll stay in the course all the way to the end and be able to apply what they've learned in later courses and in later life. So pause the video. Go to www.tltgroup.org/7/home.htm. Once you've found a good teaching idea that seems promising and sufficiently safe and easy for a first try, then start the video again. Okay, you got an idea? Something that you found in our little collection or something you've come up with on your own? Describe it to your colleagues in this workshop. Ask them if they've got suggestions for how to make it work, perhaps different variations of the same idea. If you've got time, you also might want to brainstorm with them about what kinds of questions to ask students right after you've taught this way, right after they've learned this way. How could their reactions help you decide how to improve this? What kinds of things would you like to know about what was going on in their minds, for example, when you described what you wanted them to do, or when you taught this way? How could that give you clues to do an even better job next time, reduce even more some of the risks or burdens of teaching this particular way? We're done. I hope you found this productive. Here are some references. We'll start with the URL for the TLT Group's materials on the 7 principles, the URL I showed you before. As you may have found by now, it not only includes a link to Chickering and Gamson's original article and to a later article I wrote with Art that seems to have triggered a lot of thinking about how to use technology, but also ideas for additional workshops and ways of gathering data from your colleagues and sharing them at your institution. You can also go from this page to other parts of the TLT Group website and learn about the Flashlight Online program, for example. Good luck to you. Please drop me an email. I'd love it if you could tell me what you thought of this workshop and perhaps how I can improve these materials. We're trying in a variety of ways at the TLT Group to help our subscribing institutions and their faculty improve teaching and learning, and the 7 principles of good practice seems a useful framework to do that. Good luck. Bye-bye.